So I was originally going to wait until the season finale and the series finale for The Boys aired to do this video. But I just finished watching episode 7, the penultimate episode, and I thought it would be a good idea to record a video now. And frankly, I think it's pretty clear to me at this point that I don't think the series is able to end in a conclusive way. I think the series has kind of made its bed, and there's not a lot of room to be generous about how it's going to end. I think we're in store for a pretty bad finale. And the unfortunate reality is that the signs have been there for a long time. But I try to adopt a mindset of let them cook. Even when I was watching Code Geass Rose of the Recapture, which I hated, I tried to adopt the mindset of, but they could do something in the end or eventually that makes this all make sense and makes me not hate the series. They didn't, and it was trash, and I hated it, and I made that video. But when My Hero Academia was coming out, and a lot of people said in the middle of that series and toward the end that, oh, it fell off, it's not good anymore. It's not as good as the tournament arc. I was not one of those people because I said, let him cook, right? He's setting up a lot of stuff. It's a complex world. There's a lot going on. Let's see how he ends this. And in that case, it paid off because My Hero came out and the manga ending wasn't, super well received. It had some problems. But by the time the anime came out and they fixed some of that and they have that special that came out now, but everyone's like, oh, My Hero's back. My Hero's great. Great ending, right? Because we let him cook, So I try to have that generous wait and see mindset when it comes to this stuff. But man, The Boys has had a lot of issues for a long time. The series started really strong with season 1 and season 2, which I think season 2 is still at the peak of this series. And season 3 was also really good up until the finale of season 3. Because the penultimate episode of season 3 made you think that it was going in a certain direction. And that certain direction felt like it could have been a series finale. It felt like the boys, and they had Soldier Boy in their back corner, and they were going to confront, Homelander. But there was a chance that Homelander and Soldier Boy could actually team up, and they could turn the tables on the boys. But, they also had, Butcher had Temp V, Ryan was a factor, and they had Maeve in their corner who could back them up, and there were some other factors as well. So it could have been a real big brawl, and things could have gone either way. But then you got there, and it ended up being Homelander and Butcher versus Soldier Boy. And by the time that episode was over, we kind of reset the board. Pretty much everything that happened that season became irrelevant. And by the time season 4 started, we're back where we started, basically. And it felt like studio interference to me. It felt like there was an intention to end the series, or at least set the stage for a season 4 that could have ended the series. But someone stepped in, Amazon stepped in, and they said, no, we need more of this. This makes too much money. It's too popular. We need to make sure Anthony Starr wins an award somehow. We need to drag this series out. And that's when the series officially changed from being a satirical parody of capitalism and corporate media to being a parody of itself. Because then season 4 and season 5 have been really bad about this. And I think it was also at that point, and Herogasm had a little bit of this, but Herogasm was kind of an intentional thing. And it was always a joke even in the comics, right? But it was at that point where I think the show became gratuitous for the sake of gratuitous sake. So even just this last episode that I just watched, we're in the penultimate episode of the entire series where we have to take on this insane, delusional, narcissistic Superman who's going to destroy the world if we let him. And now he's immortal, right? But we have to stop and devote 2.5 minutes to a joke about a dog's, superhero and a cat superhero sniffing each other's asses, right? That's how seriously we're taking this, because we need to have gross humor. And even in the last season, we needed to have the gross humor of, oh, he multiplies, but he always has to be naked, right? And we gotta have our mandatory dicks on screen. To this season's credit, I don't think we've had any dicks on screen yet. But that was the thing we also needed to have, like last season. Like, there always needs to be this gratuitous violence for no reason. We need to have gratuitous nudity for no reason, but only male nudity, because female nudity is not feminist, right? So and we need to have like jokes about people's asses. We got to have the Ant-Man joke. We got to do the Ant-Man joke. And even the humor and the way they do parody and satire. A lot of people felt that the series became political at a certain point, and some of those people are just stupid, right? They're like, oh, I can't believe the series became political when it started, making fun of Donald Trump and things like that. A lot of those people are stupid. The series has always been political, but I think it is fair to say that the series went from taking itself seriously and being a genuine like satire of these things to itself being a parody, and now it is like representative of the problem, right? Like, the series now only exists because it is part of the thing that it used to be making fun of, right? And that's why it's still here. That's why there's certain elements of the series, and that's why maybe Gen V got canceled, right? That's something that I heard. It was canceled, and maybe that's why it got canceled, because Gen V was actually interesting and controversial in some ways, and so that doesn't fit in with the more mainstream by comparison Gen V. So we can't do that. So instead, we need Jensen Ackles in his own prequel that is more marketable, right? It's really bad. And aside from all that, and one of the big offenders in season 4 that I always hated was the way they treated Huey in season 4, where like he was literally the victim of like so much, including like the sexual assault from Tech Knight, that then he was like raped by the doppelganger, and then that was like back to back after his dad died, and then Annie made that about her. And that does get called out in this season, but at the time, they took that seriously and made it seem like Huey was the bad guy, and then Annie was in the right. And that felt like an authorial statement. That wasn't like the characters. That was like the show itself making a statement. And I thought that was also really gross. So I think the show's politics itself have become really overt and over the top, and also really gross in a way like that, because they're not even aligned morally. They're just whatever the writers feel like, rather than being any kind of actual moral high ground, right? They're not actually purveying good morals. It's just, here's my personal morals, right? This is what I feel, and I'm going to make it your problem. And I think that's what a lot of people feel has happened to the show. It's not just a satire that did take shots at both sides in the past. Now it is overtly the writers saying, here's our politics, and we're basically only taking shots at one side. And that side deserves to have shots taken at it, but there's a couple problems. One, it is becoming increasingly hard to make fun of a world that we live in, the world we live in, that is so absurd to begin with. And B, it's just not that funny anymore, right? Like, at a certain point, it stops being funny, and you start compromising the genuine sincerity of your show, and I think we've reached that point. And the other problem is that the general writing of the show, as I said, with like the compromised finale of season 3, that's been a consistent problem throughout the last 2 seasons. And it's weird because there's moments of good writing, like even this season. I thought the section focusing on Firecracker was really good. That was an incredible section that maybe didn't affect everybody, but it was trying to make you feel for someone who was such a terrible person and doing such terrible things, but putting you in her shoes and in her mind for a moment, and really showing you like her destroying herself and her soul, and then seeing that backfire on her. And then you see more of that throughout the season. Like, we're seeing it now with the Deep, and to a certain extent you're seeing it with like what's his name, the priest, father something. You're seeing that to a lesser extent with these characters. And then even the scene when with Kessler coming back this episode, I thought that was really good. The problem is that right on the flip side of that, why the fuck is Kessler coming back? And why is he coming back in the form of this infamous psychic serial killer that Huey somehow knows about and has enough information about to be able to recall in his mind clearly images of the forensic crime scene photos in order to distract him and let Butcher kill him, when I don't think we've ever even heard about this guy before. Or if we did, he was mentioned for like half a second in the last episode. Why are we still introducing new soups? And then that introduces a problem. Then this has been a problem for a while now. Homelander was supposed to be this indestructible, godlike being that nobody can touch. But as the series goes on, it becomes increasingly obvious that Homelander actually could be killed by half of the soups in the world and like a third of the materials that exist in the world, right? Like, he can be killed by the virus. He can be killed by uranium. He can be, disabled instantly by the one hero with toxic gas powers. And then this guy comes up and he's able to instantly disable Huey and Butcher. And there's no reason to think he couldn't do this on Homelander, unless you're going to try to suggest to me that Homelander, of all people, has some kind of like impenetrable mental fortress, right? Like, that's not going to fly. It's not. And then, you come back to like other characters that I'm going to get to, like Marie, who have the bloodbending powers. Like, it becomes increasingly obvious that Homelander's really not indestructible at all, and the boys are just really bad at their job, which is another big problem with the show. The show had an interesting premise up front of how did these people with no powers sort of operating underground deal with these superheroes. That's an interesting premise, but it's only interesting for so long, because eventually it starts stretching, suspension of disbelief that they can survive and continue operating as they are. And as the show has gone on, it becomes increasingly clear that these guys are really incompetent at their jobs. Like, there are so many soups in the world who have really interesting powers that are capable of hurting, like, not just, Homelander, but any of the bad soups. And they're not being recruited. Why don't the boys go and recruit heroes from Godolphin? Why has Marie and all of the cast of Gen V been relegated to the sidelines? Why are they just now showing up for like a cameo in the penultimate episode? Marie alone could kill basically everyone in the show. And she, when she introduces herself in this episode, she says, "Oh, my powers have been greatly exaggerated." And I don't know if that's her normal self-doubt bullshit that she still needs to get over, which is ridiculous, or if that's the writers trying to retcon her power level and say basically Cypher was hyping her up in Gen V Season 2, which is an insane take after what we saw her do, literally bring people back to life and like explode people. And after what we saw, Victoria do with her lesser version of Marie's power. Why aren't we recruiting more people like Marie? There's plenty of them. I mean, even, what was her name? The metal bending girl. She could have been an ally. I mean, I don't think she was like evil inherently. She just kind of disappeared. And then she came back and she's on Homelander's side. Who knows why? But she could have been recruited. Like, you could recruit any number of soups in this world who would be a serious threat to the Seven, the Deep, certainly. And, Black Noir, who supposedly can fly. And Homelander, if you put them all together in the same room. Like, you almost killed Homelander with Huey, Butcher, and Soldier Boy. I mean, if you get an actual Justice League of 7 talented soups together, including Marie, he's toast. He's done. Like, it's insane. So it's like, what is the writing here? And then talking about power levels, like, man, once again, Annie gets to do nothing. So, like, the joke on Annie has been, like, ever since season 3, again, with the finale, where she does this whole hype moment of, like, gathering all the light in the room, and then she just pushes Soldier Boy back a couple feet. this is the first time she's even used her powers this season when she like goes up against Oh Father. That's his name. Oh Father last episode, and he just completely trounces her with his sound-based powers. So there you go. You're telling me Oh Father is the only sound-based superhero in the world? He can't possibly be, right? And he happens to be on Homelander's side. Okay, sure. Find another sound-based superhero who's against Homelander, has to be at least one. Put him on the Justice League, right? You get Starlight, you get Marie, you get the rest of Gen V, and you get a sound-based superhero. Homelander's done. He's toast. What's he gonna do, right? Because we know he's susceptible to sound. We know, we've seen it. So it just seems increasingly silly that the boys are like, Mother's Milk and Frenchie still carry pistols, and then if it doesn't work, they're like, fuck. And then you had Bombsight, who has, we're still introducing Soups. Bombsight has, V1. We don't know what his powers are exactly. He can fly at least. He's one of the few Soups that can fly. Put him on the Justice League. He doesn't, we don't know much about him, but he didn't join the regime at least, right? Goldie has a good power. It's just insane that we're still introducing all these Soups. And none of them are relevant to the plot, right? Like, it's still just about the boys. And even Butcher's power was set up to be really powerful, and he barely uses it. Speaking of his power, it was meant to be like this corrupting force in his mind. It's barely a factor. He's just Butcher. Like, he's just the same oi cunt that he's always been, right? Like, there's nothing going on there that we've seen yet. And if there is, it's being saved until the last episode. Oh, and I fucking forgot. I didn't even mention the mini Homelander who's against Homelander, Ryan, because we haven't seen him in like 3 episodes after he got his ass beat, right? Where's he at? Where's he been? Okay? You want to talk about bad writing. The constant flip-flopping of, Ryan and the way that Butcher treats him and Ryan's allegiances between Butcher and Homelander, that shit was driving me insane. And then this season, we get the same shit with Soldier Boy. Every 5 minutes, Soldier Boy's like, yeah, I'm against Homelander. Yeah, I'm for Homelander. Yeah, I'm against Homelander. Yeah, I'm with Homelander. It's like he gives him V1 and then he's like, yeah, I'm leaving because you're fucking weird, dude. I'm not into this. I'm not about this. I'm going to give you ultimate godlike power for you to rule the world, but I don't want to be part of it. I'm going to check out. And then he gets put back into cryo sleep again. It's absolute madness. Like, why are we doing this with this character? I don't understand. I just don't understand. Like, at this point, Soldier was a plot device. You know what I mean? He's literally just a plot device. It's absolutely insane. And so for me, I felt like Gen V has been a better show for the last 2 seasons. Like, both seasons of Gen V were better than the last 2 seasons of The Boys. Because you're following a group of actual superheroes with actual powers that are relevant to their personalities and their personal struggles and traumas, that you get to follow their stories, and they're working together dealing with interesting like conspiracies, corporate conspiracies at the school, and like dealing with Cypher, who was a really interesting villain, right? And like Marie's past and her powers, and bloodbending is a really cool power that needs to be explored more in media. And the fact that they have powers lets them do so much more interesting stuff. They can face more threats, and the way in which they interact with each other. I mean, it's like, it's such a more interesting show, and the characters are so much more interesting, and we've just sidelined all of them, right? They're not even around. We only saw Jordan and Marie, right? Why? And now I'm hearing that Gen V season 3 has been canceled. Why? That's insane. Are you telling me it had low viewership? Well, maybe that's because you're telling people they don't need to watch it. Can we stop doing this? Can we stop telling people that they don't need to watch the side production that you spend millions of dollars on, that you have a really great cast for and a really great story for, that you're building up to be integral to the story, right, in the world building of your universe? Can we stop doing that? And then acting surprised when they don't watch it because you told them they didn't have to fucking watch it? And I know that, they obviously had the tragedy of Chance Prodromo dying, and that's really shitty, right? Obviously awful. But even that they handled with, respect, and they were able to incorporate it into the story in a respectful and meaningful way. And I think they could have, kept going from there. And maybe that was a huge factor in the decision. I don't know. But it's really shitty that Gen V got canceled so that fucking Soldier Boy can get a prequel. You know what I mean? And I just don't understand what the point of a prequel here is. It's just, there's a lot of missed potential here. There's a lot of really shitty writing in this show. And now there's so many things, there's so many plates spinning. There's so many loose threads. And even stuff like, Frenchie's death this episode was handled really poorly. Ashley's power, people were speculating she'd get a cool Medusa power. Instead, she gets a mind-reading conscience on the back of her head, which now has probably fucked her over, right? Because she has refused to learn her lesson. She has refused to, grow a conscience. Maybe she will in the very end. I don't know. I guess we'll see. It's just, I don't understand how the show can have moments of greatness and then so much of it can just be like filler nonsense. It's like we've spent so much, and I was against the filler accusations for most of the season. But now that we're at the end, I have to look back and say, yeah, I feel like we have been doing a lot of filler because of how little real meaningful content there has been here. Not to mention how often we're doing this like constant chasing of the ever-changing MacGuffin. We got to find this one thing that'll certainly kill Homelander this time, right? And it was the virus, and then it was like, we got to recreate the virus, and now it's the uranium, and now the uranium probably isn't going to work, right? We can't. That was an insane one-episode plot line. We're going to try and give Kimiko uranium, and now we're finally recruiting other soups. I don't know why this wasn't always the original plan, as I was just, going on about. So I just don't know how a production with this much money behind it, with this kind of popularity, and that has this much potential where it can have like a really good, complex, long-running arc like you see with A-Train, and then conversely, the same kind of arc, but for the Deep, where he really doesn't ever, redeem himself and he only gets worse, that kind of humiliation arc. How can it have such strong, multi-season long arcs, but fumble the bag when it comes to like such basic storytelling principles as where the fuck has Ryan been, right? Like, where is this kid? Like, why is this kid who was so important for like 2 seasons now irrelevant to the plot? No one's even talking about him. I just don't understand. So I don't think we're in for a good ending. I think we're in for a really shitty ending. I think the season finale is going to be bad. And that's a shame. But who knows? Maybe I'll be proven wrong. I guess we'll see. I guess we'll see. Maybe miracles happen.